Welcome to Freddie's Huge Ask Podcast. Huge lives and the stories behind them.
3, 2, 1.
And now here's your host, Freddie Cruz.
At the tender age of 22, my next guest lost $40 million in one single deal. Today, he's an entrepreneur with a social media footprint of over 3 million followers across the world and several books to his name, including his latest, Momentum. He's the man, Evan Carmichael. Welcome.
Thanks, Freddie. You had to lead with like my most painful moment of all time. I appreciate that. That's great.
Well, you know, that's how I do on this podcast.
Tell me about your most painful memory and let's dive in. I love it, dude. I love the vibe, love the energy. Honored to be here and can't wait to chop it up with you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, man. So I got to ask you, since we are starting with all the hard stuff first, because that's just how we roll. What do you think 9-year-old Evan would say if you were to hop into a time machine and tell him, hey, little guy, you're going to lose $40 million one day, but I'm not going to tell you anything else?
9-year-old Evan is like, I don't care. I want to be a baseball player, Freddie. Actually, maybe even earlier. Yeah, no, 9-year-old Evan. So listen, 8-year-old Evan, we had the Olympics in 1988 with Ben Johnson was going to be like the sprinter for the 100-meter race. He was an icon in Canada and he won the 100-meter race. And it's like, that was the whole thing. He was my hero. And then it came out that he took steroids.
Yeah.
And he cheated. So they stripped him of the medal. And like my life was over. Like I was so devastated that my hero got stripped. And then my mom introduced me to baseball cards. And then the Blue Jays came to Toronto, I think in 89 when I was 9 years old. So it was like the height of like baseball mania. And so like I wanted to be a baseball player. So I wasn't really, I mean, I had little tiny businesses, I guess, when I was younger, but it wasn't until I was 12, 13 that I really started doing anything money related. So yeah, 9-year-old Evan doesn't even know what $40 million means, doesn't care about it. And it's like, okay, but did I still make the team, Freddie? Am I still starting third baseman or not?
Yeah. What position did you play in when you were a kid?
I sucked, dude. I was the worst. I
left out.
I would have been the worst baseball player. I mostly played either right field or first base. And yeah. I honestly prayed that they would not hit the ball to me because I didn't want to disappoint my teammates in case I screwed up. But mostly first base. I was mostly first base. I couldn't hit very well. I could run. That was the only thing I had for me. I was fast. I would run. I would hustle.
Yeah.
But my hero was Kelly Gruber, who was the third baseman for the Toronto Blue Jays. Yeah, and won World Series with. And my goal as a kid was I wanted to be a third baseman for the Toronto Blue Jays. And I wanted to be a police officer in the off season. That's what I wanted to be growing up.
This is going to lead into my next question. So when I was a kid, I wanted to be Bo Jackson because I loved football and baseball. And this legend. Dude could do it all. One of the greatest touchdowns in the history of the NFL to this day is that 91-yard touchdown run where it's against the Seahawks. And he's playing for the Raiders, and he goes all the way into the locker room because his momentum is just like unstoppable. But those dreams were shattered.
Or Kansas City?
I'm sorry?
Are you in California or Kansas City?
No. I was I was also an Oilers fan. Not so much a Houston Texans fan anymore.
Okay.
But no, in middle school, we got the talk. And the talk was 99.99999% of you will not be in the NFL, much less college, so do good in school. So all of this to ask you, Evan, because you wanted to be a Toronto Blue Jay. Did you have anything like the talk, or what was like the proverbial coming to Jesus moment for you?
I don't know that I had that. My parents always kind of encouraged me to do whatever I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I remember like my dad hopped on a streetcar. We'd like go to Exhibition Stadium, which was an open air stadium in Canada. It was freaking cold and snowing just to watch the Blue Jays play. I think it just started to turn once baseball cards became a thing, 92, 93, Upper Deck and like Baseball Mania. And at the same time, the Blue Jays were winning back-to-back World Series. So it's like the height of baseball. We're winning World Series. The cards are going nuts. So I had a business where every week I was trading baseball cards and driving hours to go to card shows. And that got me hooked on entrepreneurship and business. Okay. And then since then, I had a lot of different business things. I was still pretty athletic in school, but never really joined any of the team sports and focused more on entrepreneurial ideas. I think it was much more of a natural transition of just interests than somebody told me that I sucked, or I had this moment that I just realized that this dream was dead and I'm going into depression, or it was just I did and it's so painful that I've blocked it out from my mind and I can't remember it, which is possible too.
Yeah, I mean, I like your trajectory much better, because let me tell you, when you're, and I think humans, I don't think we ever really lose the ego. Some of it, obviously, some of it remains for more of us than others as we head into our older years. I'm in my late 40s, but it was something to get that moment, like your coach tells you you think you're good, but you're really not. And so figure out what it's going to be. And, my family never really discouraged me one way or the other either. They, it was always a supportive thing too, but to hear that from, I guess, a position of authority that's not in your family. Typically it's like the other way around, where the family member's like, well, I'm going to live vicariously through you, Evan. So of course you're going to be a baseball player and you're going to be the best one. I'm going to take you to the batting cages at 4 a.m.
Yeah. I think I have the opposite of the ego problem. Whatever that is, like too small. Too feeling like I'm not good enough. I'm so not good enough that I won't even try. Like I'm so afraid to disappoint people that I won't even sign up to be on the team, because I don't want the ball, because if I get the ball, I might miss, and then I'll let my team down. So like to the extreme. So I think that if anything, I need more ego. I need to play more bold and more brash. That's what I've been working on more than like be humble and all of those things. So that really hurt. I mean, it shows up in business. It shows up in life. I've something that I continue to work on. I've gotten better at it, but I'm still kind of nowhere close to where I could be.
And speaking of that, entrepreneurs, it seems just in recent years, at least to me, it does. But it seems like entrepreneurs who speak openly about failures and setbacks, you got your $40 million loss, like there on your website. You're not hiding it, man.
On the episode here.
Yeah, you've embraced it. Yeah, but it seems like speaking openly about these kinds of things is more acceptable. I guess to people who really truly get that that's what it takes. But then on the flip side, they're like the ones who haven't yet bought into that mindset, that they're still kind of stuck there. Now, what do you see? Because you are like deep in this world. You're hanging with Gary Vee and Grant Cardone and Tom Bilyeu. Like, what's it like on that level to you? Do you see more of an acceptance for that, more of an appetite? Like, hey, tell me all about the time that you screwed up, or tell me all about this, because I really want to learn from that. Or do you see it leaning more that way, or do you see like the hard-headed kind of mentality, like, oh no, we're only celebrating our wins?
So I think it depends on who you look up to. I think if we look at Instagram, for example, it's a lot of people sharing all of their best moments. It's their highlight reel of their life and all these awards that you won and the beautiful Photoshop beach picture and all that. And I think there's still definitely a lot of that, and a lot of people who are too afraid to ever show any kind of weakness. Even some people in the personal development space are like too afraid to show their weakness. And then some people are very candid and upfront and share everything, and that becomes their brand. If you look at Gary, he's very open about how he struggles with being candid, having candid conversations. Mel Robbins is very open to sharing, like her brand of personal development is basically all the stuff that she's trying to figure out for herself.
Yeah.
She says, and then she learns and then she teaches. So I think, authenticity is a big buzzword people are throwing around. I think it can definitely help connect people to you. I think it just depends on who you're following. There's a lot of people who come off as perfect still, and they grow their following doing that. And there's a lot of people who lean into the other side and show all the warts, and that attracts people as well.
I love that, showing all the warts.
Showing all the warts. And you get to decide who you want to be, right? I think ultimately you'll be happier if you show the warts and what you're insecure about. And like James Altucher, a friend of the channel, he likes to say for his podcast that he basically thinks about what's the problem that he's most embarrassed about right now that like someone like him should have figured out, and then tell people about it. Like, what are you struggling with right now that you should have already figured out by now, and then tell people. And that makes him very endearing. That's why a lot of people love him.
Yeah, I love James, and he's always going to have a special place in my heart, because I feel like he was the one who gave me permission to give myself permission to write my first fiction book. And so, yeah, and I think a lot of what entrepreneurs, I've got a little startup. A lot of what we struggle with on a daily basis is looking ourselves in the mirror and saying, "You can do it. Get out of your head, slay the giant in the back of your mind, and go to work."
Yeah, I think it just becomes a choice of who do you want to be.
Yeah.
And how much of a front do you want to put on versus who you actually are? Like, because both can work. There's lots of people in tons of power who you don't know anything about their weaknesses or their insecurities, and they have them. You take a Donald Trump. I'm Canadian, so I'm not political, but I've never, or any politician for that matter. Just Trump is, you might be seen as having the biggest level of self-confidence or whatever you want to call it. Have you ever seen him say anything weak or apologize or say, here's where I struggle? I don't know that many politicians will do that, period. But he's had success, or someone like Kanye has had lots of success without leaning in on the vulnerable, authentic, here's where I struggle side. So you can win. I think it just depends on, I think the other side has just opened up more. I think that used to be the only way to win. I think if you went back to my parents' generation, it'd be more, well, that is, you have to come across as perfect, and that's what people respect. And now there's more ways to win leaning in on the other side. But I don't know that it goes all the way there. I don't know that it ever becomes that 100%. Maybe it does. I don't know if it does in my lifetime. But the good news is you have a choice. So anybody watching, listen, you get to decide how you want to show up. Do you want to have the perfect persona and that's it? Or do you want to lean into the things that you're struggling with?
Shifting the conversation, Evan, can you tell me about Matthew McConaughey and angels and book mediums?
That's how I ended up writing my book, Momentum.
Love the cover art, by the way.
Well, this was inspired cover art too. I love playing in people's energy and whatever makes them come alive. So what I mean by that is, if you said, "Hey, Evan, before we get started, we need to jump up and down 4 times and like yell at the top of our lungs." Okay, yeah, that's how you roll. Like, as long as it's not against my ethics somehow, and I'm not hurting somebody, it's like, I'll do that, Freddie. Let's go. Because if that helps, like, I want to speak the language of the person I'm talking to instead of forcing my language. So if your language is, "Hey, we have to do this before we get started," or you have to breathe 14 times through your nose and exhale together. It's like, okay, that's your language. Like, we're going to have a better conversation if I understand the way you process things better. So why I say that is I'm happy to do almost anything within my, code of values. And it's very rare that things kind of veer outside. But there's a woman I met named Kira who, she said she's a book medium. And I met her at this mastermind, paid $25,000 to be in this group. And she didn't know who I was. I didn't know who she was. And I said, "Hey, I'm Evan. What do you do?" "I'm a book medium." "Cool. What does that mean?" I'm curious. It's like, "Well, I help channel people's books." It's like, "Okay, cool. I've written a couple books. Like, what does that process look like?" And at the time I had no intention of writing another book. So I said, "Why don't we do an Instagram live of you channeling my book, whatever that means?" And she's like, "Are you sure you want to make that public? Like, this is a very intimate thing and you've never done it before." It's like, "Yeah, whatever." I mean, because in leaning into the insecurity, I like it because I think it shows permission. So I've done I did a live one-on-one with Gary V's life coach that we put on the channel. We've done like EFT tapping. Marissa Peer put me under in hypnotherapy. It's like, cool. That's how you roll. Let's give it a shot. So we did an Instagram live, and she said, "Okay, you're going to call in your angels, and she went through this whole process." It's like, "Okay, you got your angels are around you. Who do you see?" I said, "I see Matthew McConaughey." "Why?" "I don't know. That's what's there." we're vibing. That's all. That's what's coming up. And like he whispers in your ear, what's your next book? And it said momentum. Like, okay, cool. So I'm gonna I just roll with it. And then I ended up creating this book. Like I wrote this book in 5 days, where my first book took me a year to write with Penguin Random House. And so like it worked. And I think often we'll just judge things going in. It's not like every night I'm praying to my angel Matthew McConaughey to come and save me from something. But like in that process, it helped me write this book. And I ended up investing in the business and owning part of the company with Kira, who's now my business partner, because I was just open-minded and willing to go with the flow and see what happens.
I got to know, because this book is not a children's book sized book. This is it's meaty, and there are a few pictures, but when I say a few, like only a few. So this is it's a book. How many words did you crank out per day? So 5 days, was it an even number? Would you, if you had to guesstimate, or
did you guesstimate? I wrote it most of this book is like advice on how to get momentum in whatever the thing is. You want to write a book, you want to get a podcast, whatever.
Yep.
But I also wrote my writing sessions as I went. So I gave my thoughts, like after day one, my thoughts of like, how am I going to do this? Initially, she challenged me to do it in 8 weeks. Like, I can't do this in 8 weeks. I've got other responsibilities. My first book took me a year. There's no way this is going to happen. I'm not going to stop my software company, my YouTube channel. And so I wrote down all of my insecurities and my thought process as I was going. But it took me on page 209. It shows like the day by day of how many words I wrote. And so day one was 5,600. Day two was 6,300. And so I kept track of how many words. So total is 40,483 words. And it's a 230, 20, something like that, page book. So yeah, I kept track as I went. And so it's to help serve as an inspiration that sometimes we think these projects have to take a long time. And these were not full day writing sessions. Like a lot of this was an hour and a half, 2 hours, 2.5 hours. That I squeezed in between everything else I was doing.
Yeah, and going back to something, we talk about James Altucher, something that he had mentioned on Twitter one day, and that really stuck with me was he added up all the minutes, which add up to hours that we spend like watching TV and being in traffic and being in the restroom and being on Twitter and on social media and checking emails and texting people. And it came out to this ridiculous amount of hours per day. And then I think the question was posed, like, imagine what you could be creating instead of doing these other things. And so to your point, you were able to crank this out in a very short amount of time.
Yeah. And I started on a Tuesday. We had our Instagram live session on Tuesday. We finished at 3:00, and the book is called Momentum. So when she asked, when are you going to start? Well, how do I start it next year? Like, it's called Momentum. I kind of have to start like right now. If I'm going to call it Momentum, right? Yeah. If I was going to call it procrastination, then that's fine. Next year. Great. So I had to start right away. And I got some words done that day. I got some words done the next day on the Wednesday. Wednesday is my project day, so it's completely open. So I had time to work on things. But then the day after that was Thursday. And Thursday is my public-facing day, where it's wall-to-wall interviews and podcasts. And like, we're recording this on a Thursday. I don't know when it goes live, but it's wall-to-wall, 25 minutes on, 5-minute break, 25, like the whole day. It's like, well, I'm not going to get any work done on my book on Thursday. Like, there's no way. And I write this, like my insecurities and concerns. Like, I don't want to lose momentum on the book because I'm going to day 3 and there's 0 time to do it. And then on Thursday, 2 people cancel back to back last minute. So now I have like this hour in the middle of the day to actually do something. And so we think about, like, what do we normally do if something happens? If I couldn't make this podcast for some reason, Freddie, I'm sick. Freddie, that happens. People cancel, reschedule, stuff always happens. What do we do in that time? Do we actually be intentional with it? Probably I would have, I don't know, checked email, checked my social media, something. Probably not the highest leverage because I had something else planned. It got last minute change, so I'm going to do something low value. But like, I got an hour. Let me write. This is fantastic, right? And I think we actually can find these moments where we are wasting time or doing low level activity, where we stay busy. I think a lot of entrepreneurs stay busy on things that a lot of times don't matter. Like, we do a lot of work that's not very efficient we're distracted by a bunch of things, and the actual outcome of that thing is actually not that consequential versus taking action on the thing that actually means the most to us. So I think we had those moments. And again, I had a full schedule. I got 40-something people on my team. I'm running multiple businesses and agencies, and I had no time planned to write this book. On top of that, we had a health scare in the middle of it where my wife got this lump above her breast that we have to go to the doctor and like was insane. She's okay. Like I talk about that in the book. But that killed an entire day. I'm behind on everything. And yet still got the book done, 40,000 words in 5 days. So it's possible.
I love it. I love it. And, you know, in the book, you cover different mindset shifts and strategies, which is like a theme of this conversation. One of my favorites is that of creating play bigger trigger words. So what is a good first step for somebody who is wanting to teach themselves to play bigger?
So the idea here is we are our own worst enemy. Most of the conversations we have with ourselves are actually not very flattering. If you think about how you talk to yourself, what you say to yourself in the mirror, it's usually not flattering. We tell ourselves things that we would not tell our worst enemies. We might be lifting other people up, like, hey, you can do it, go do it. But then to ourselves, it's like, you're not good enough. You can't do this. Who are you to think? Like, it's just a lot of negative self-talk. Even for the most optimistic entrepreneurs, it's still a lot of negative self-talk. So that's the bad news. The good news is whatever the negative self-talk is, it's usually the same negative self-talk every day. Like, we're not going through a ton of variety. It's like the same thing that you tell yourself every day of why you suck and you can't do it, right? Which is great because those can become what I call play bigger trigger words, where the idea is anytime you catch yourself saying it, thinking it, writing it, texting it, talking to a friend about it, like anytime those words pop up, it's a trigger to force you to go and do the thing. So for me, it's scary, difficult, or hard. When I say, feel, thinks, that's too scary. Now I have to do it because it's scary. That's difficult. Well, I want to teach myself that I do difficult because everything I want out of life is on the other side of difficult. If I'm not doing difficult things, I say stuck where I am just by definition. So difficult cannot any longer be a good enough reason for me not to do the thing. If getting on Freddie's show is scary, okay, I got to do it because I do scary things. Freddie's not scary. This is great. I'm having fun.
Well, it can't be scary sometimes.
But scary, difficult, hard are mine. So what are the things that you're telling yourself in the audience? Like you're telling yourself as to why you won't win. And anytime those come up, what it does is shortcuts the brain because your brain will find really smart reasons why you can't do something and justify it. But really, you're just afraid. So when you say, feel, write those things, whatever those words are, I like having three, like whatever the three most common ones are, then it's a trigger to action to say, okay, I don't want to be this person anymore. I don't want to be the person telling myself this, accepting this as a good enough reason. And so I'm going to take the more courageous action. And so when you can catch those things, it forces you to become a more bold version of yourself. It's one of the reasons why people struggle with momentum.
The book is Momentum, and the website is believe.evancarmichael.com. Evan, my man, thank you so much for coming by the podcast.
Thanks, Freddie. Appreciate you and the questions. It was tons of fun.
Thank you for listening to Freddie's Huge Ask podcast.